This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me.
We're reading the book on Rollo Tomassi's book, The Rational Male. And then, so what I'll be doing is I'll just sort of go through and read some of what he's written, and then we'll have a discussion. And like I said, if you want to speak about personal things, you don't want to be live on YouTube, just let me know. You don't want to be in the recording, just let me know. I'll cut you out of the recording and we'll go off YouTube if that's what you want. But usually it's just me who speaks too much about personal things, and a lot of people don't feel comfortable doing that. So I decided to record it so we can reach more people. And that's what we're doing here. So I've combined two groups. I've got the dating and relationship meetups that I just started and took over for one group in New York. And then I created another one here for Los Angeles. And then I'm also part of the nonpartisan Red Pill Men's Group. And that's a group where we discuss dating, sexuality, women, relationships, and politics without all the right-wing crap. So, and then today we're going to be talking about the soulmate myth. And so we meet, let me put this in, we meet every month. So welcome to the nonpartisan Red Pill Men's Group. We meet every month, and you can register for that meeting just like you did here. And that's at tinyurl.com/redpillmen. And today we're talking about the soulmate myth. And so I'm just going to start with his book. We're reading the section on the religion of the soulmate first. And basically what he does is he talks about how he was in a class, and when the class was asked about religion, they all said they were agnostic and they were atheist, or they were spiritual but not religious. And they sort of created religion as sort of a way to deal with death, maybe part of a delusion. But when they asked whether there was that special person, that one person that was meant to be with you, they all raised their hand. They all believed in that there was this one person that they were meant. There's one man for every woman type of myth. And what we really know is that there's not one man for one woman. There's actually one man for multiple women and multiple men with no women. And that's what the situation is right now. And so, and then we were talking about just in the previous session, he was talking about one-itis, the idea that there's this one person and you fear losing that one person, or this is that person, and they're my soulmate, and that's it. And if I lose them, and so I'm just going to start reading now before he goes into it. So he says it's an irrational belief in predestination, or even amongst the least spiritual, that it's just a part of life to pair off with someone significant, and there was someone for everyone. And despite all odds, people largely feel entitled or deserving of an important love in their life. And statistically and pragmatically, though, this is ridiculous, he says. The feminized Disneyfication of this core concept has been romanticized and commercialized to the point of it becoming a religion. And he says the Shakespearean longing for the one, the search for another soulmate who was destined to be our match, has been systematically distorted beyond all reason. And as I'll elaborate later, men take their own lives in the delusion of having lost the one. And then we go into the men and the soulmate and how men are affected. It says the perversion of the soulmate myth is attributed in large part to the feminized social conventions we deal with today. The fear of isolation from our imagined soulmate, or the fear of having irrecoverably lost the perfect one for us, fuels so much of the personal and social neuroses we find in the contemporary matrix of our society. For example, much of the fear inherited in the myth of the lonely old man loses its teeth without a core belief in the soulmate myth. The feminine imperative recognized the overarching power of the soulmate myth had over men and women from the beginning of the rise to ascendancy of the primary gender social imperative. And I think what he's talking about when he talks about the gender social imperative or the feminine imperative is the maximization of hypergamy. Is that right, Eric? You think he's talking about that? The maximization of hypergamy as the feminine imperative?
Probably. He does talk about that a lot in the book. I have not read all of the book, but that is a common theme. Yes.
Yeah. So I think that that's what he means here, the feminine control of men, in the service of natural selection is another way of putting it.
Yeah.
Virtually all of the distortions of the core soulmate dynamic evolved as controlling schema for men. And I think what he means is that the soulmate is to control men's behavior, to get them to give up their sexual strategy, which is to spread their seed with as many women as possible to go for that one woman. When it is soulmate women who are the primary reward for a soulmate necessitous man, there are a lot of opportunities to consolidate that power upon. And he doesn't think it's a fiendish plot of a femme-centric cabal socially engineering the soulmate fear into men. In fact, later on, he talks about how the soulmate myth really doesn't help women either. And but generations of men raised to be oblivious to it willingly and actively help perpetuate the myth. He says it's so and then he talks about the soulmate myth in women, and that he says hypergamy intensifies neurosis. Now, what hypergamy is the tendency of women to date laterally and up in the social hierarchy, financially, social status. They're always looking for someone better than them. And so that's what he means by hypergamy. Particularly, it says the languishing associated with pining for the alpha that got away, that women have these hot studs that they had when they were young, that they were trying to get, they were swinging for the fences, trying to get the richest, biggest, baddest guy they could, and they lost him, and they're never the same, is sort of that idea. I'm not sure how much that is true, but that's his point of view. Particularly when she's paired off with a long term with a dutiful beta provider after her sexual market value declines. So the beta is the other side of the equation. Women want a provider, they want money, and they want sex. They put it simply, they want a stud and they want big bucks. And so but they don't come in one package. And so they have to settle after they hit the wall, about 30, they have to settle for a guy that they might not have preferred, was not the alpha stud that they really, really wanted. And so, and the second, sexual market value declining is a major part of his theory, that women peak in the 20s, men peak in their 30s, and then men maintain value much better than women do over time. So, and it's kind of a commodified market in a way. Let's see.
What
So
page numbers are you on, Richard?
I'm on page 6 right now. So I turned from 5 to page 6, and I'm going to go into page 7, and that will be it. So he says, for women, the soulmate represents the nigh unattainable combination of arousing alpha dominance matched with a loyal providership for her long-term security that only she can tame out of him. It says, hypergamy hates the soulmate principle. So because the soulmate is an absolute definition, whereas hypergamy must always test for protection, for perfection, hypergamy asks, is he the one? Is he the one? And the soulmate myth replies, he has to be the one. He's your soulmate. There's only one of those. So basically what that means is that it frustrates hypergamy in a way, because hypergamy means you're always looking for that bigger, better guy. You know, a lot of women reserve the right to always have their eye out for that bigger, better guy. And so, but when you get to the one, then, you know, that's the one. It frustrates hypergamy as well in that sense. And so he's on building the mystery. It says, we want to build our intimate relationships into the soulmate idealism in order to relieve the fear and solve the problem. And the problem is, both sexes will seek to perfect that idealization for themselves. Well, anyway. And then for women, the impact of the most significant alpha male is what initially defines the soulmate idealization. For men, it may be the first woman they become sexual with him, or the one who best exemplifies a woman he mistakenly believes can love him in a male-defined orientation of love. And what he means by that is that men feel that women should be able to love them for themselves. And we really love women for who they are, because, hey, their physical presence, their body, their appearance is who they are. But women have all these other qualifications, and we have other qualifications too, make no mistake about that. But women tend to love us for what we do, what we provide, what we can do. And so there's a conflict there between his definition of the feminine version of love, which he describes as opportunistic love, or some people define it as consuming love, and the men's idealized version of love, which is to love a person for who they are. And so let's see. Yeah. So here she says is ridiculous. It's psychologically much more pragmatic to construct another person to fit that ideal than it ever will be to wait for fate to take its course. People subscribing to the myth would rather build a soulmate, consequences be damned. So women will attempt to build a better beta. That means building the provider, making him more sexual, or making him a better provider, or tame down an alpha, a guy who is out fooling around, who has a lot of women. And so that's their conception. While men will attempt to turn a whore into a housewife, or vice versa. So sometimes women don't come in one package either sometimes. in that sense. And but if anything, it will free you to have a better, healthier future relationship with someone who is genuinely important to you. So dropping the soulmate myth isn't the nihilism a lot of people might have you believe it is. It's going to free you to a better, healthier future relationship with someone who you generally like, a relationship based on genuine desire, mutual respect, complementary understanding of each other and love, rather than one based on a fear of losing your one and only representation of contentment in life. In any relationship, and then he goes on to power, the one who needs that. And that will be the next chapter and our next discussion, which would be power in relationships. And he says, whether you want to base your relationship on power or not isn't the issue. It's already in play. You are acceptable to her for meeting any number of criteria, and she meets your own criteria as well. If this weren't the case, you simply would not be initiate a mutual relationship. So I know some of you might think that, you're looking for your soulmate out there, but what Rollo Tomassi is saying, look for another person. There isn't this one person out there. You got to look for a person that's right for you. And those things, mutual respect, mutual desire. Relationships nowadays are based largely on mutual desire rather than on roles. I mean, women worked in the past, it wasn't like women didn't work, they worked, and men had roles and women had roles. And nowadays it's kind of like, well, those roles don't work because they're not same roles. But anyway, I don't want to digress. So now I'm opening it up to questions and comments on that.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on that. It seems like it makes both genders choosier. If you drop the soulmate notion, then we can be choosier, which does kind of decrease the amount of relationships that are actually happening. I think current statistics show that too. Like marriage is at an all-time low. And according to some other factors I'm not sure how they measure that, but that's things I've heard from credible sources,
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm curious if someone wants to comment on this. I mean, the last thing you said, Richard, is that women don't need men in the sense of the resources men can provide. I think a lot of them do, but not as much as in the past, not as much as 50, 60, 100 years ago, So if anyone wants to comment on that, I think it's probably true, although we also know we have an underclass in the United States that does not have sufficient resources. So, both may be true.
Well, what I'm thinking is, in the 1800s, maybe even into the 1900s, women had work to do, in their roles, taking care of, that was work, washing clothes by hand, everything by hand, making things women had a realm of work that they participated in. When we get to the 50s, we begin to see, this idea of this, and I'm not sure if it was an idea that actually came up of the trophy wife, right? Sort of the idea of, was this now the most beautiful woman we can, I guess, but that the women would stay home as a housewife, right? But it was less work than before, I think. But then we had in the 50s, I'd watch these programs, and man, boy, you ever watch Dobie
Gillis?
Gillis, yeah.
Yeah.
And all the women, in the 50s, boom, you got to be rich, boom, boom. They're looking for that guy who's going to make them, who's going to be rich. I mean, it sort of really seemed to evolve out of that, because before, you really needed a man if you wanted to start a family, work on a farm, whatever you had to do to make a living. women and men work together. So there was a need for that. And before that, there were arranged marriages, right?
Yeah.
So marriage was not romantic. And then we have development of romantic arrangements and ideas. And then we have the sort of a reduction in women's role in the home, where we're not out milking cows anymore, making everything from scratch anymore, everything's convenient, and so you had Betty Friedan and the feminine mystique come out with women discovering their, as I think I talked, is it discovering their washing machines, because those things used to rock a lot. And being unhappy as housewives. I mean, it was very unfulfilling for a lot of women who have a lot of potential. And so, but I think now we're, now we have a situation where women are out making their own money, but they can't get past what evolutionary psychologists would say is their sort of Neanderthal era sexuality, or something where a man has to, hypergamy. They can't get past hypergamy, in a sense. I mean, they can see different things as of value, it's not necessarily only money, but the idea that a man that they have to move up in the social ladder, means that men have to move down. Women want a man who's better than them, which means that men have to accept a woman who is less than them. And that's something that Orion Taraban taught recently.
Yes. Yeah. Mhm.
And so so that's where we're at. And I mean, the myth of the soulmate might cause us a lot of worry and angst that's just unnecessary. We're just human beings trying to meet our needs, and in a society and culture and with a evolution that can sometimes be toxic, on both sides, women and men. Our sexuality and our culture and our politics, obviously, and sexual politics can be very toxic. So, but so the soulmate myth is, does anybody believe in the soulmate myth? Anybody want to defend the soulmate myth here, even though, or does anybody want to bring up some of their dating questions or issues? Because we have this dating meetup as well, and how this pertains to actually dating. Don't all speak at once.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got anything to add there, Eric?
I mean, I don't believe in the soulmate notion anymore. But again, I think it's deeply embedded out there. I'm guessing, and this is a guess, I don't know this, but that maybe women believe in it more than men, but who knows,
Yeah. I think
But,
probably men believe in it, maybe even, I wouldn't say that women believe in it more than men, but because men can believe in it too, quite a
Yeah.
bit.
right. True. Yeah.
But
So,
yeah, I was going to say something. Oh, I was going to tell you my personal story. Should avoid personal stories, but the idea that my high school sweetheart was my soulmate, right? I went to a psychic once who was doing a group reading that somebody lost their wife in the 1980s. I'm thinking, well, I lost my high school sweetheart. Actually, what happened is she went to go fool around and swing for the fences, and pulled some junk on me as well, which I've talked about before. But, and then thinking, by the time she hits 30, she could just roll on back to me, and that's so much what happens, If I was her soulmate, she walked away from me to go fool around and then lost it. Right. So that's something that sometimes comes up for me and thinking about her. I don't even know if she still thinks about me. Occasionally I think about her, particularly some of the, since I've been dealing with some trauma in that regard. So
yeah, and I think that can happen with both genders too. Like the alpha widow, isn't that notion about a woman that, what you say, swings for the fences, but in baseball, when you swing for the fences too much, you tend to strike out mostly, like Dave Kingman, but so you're better off to go for the base hits or the base on balls and, move the runner along and all that stuff. But human psychology takes over and a person wants what they want, but future planning might point to another way to go. But I mean, I think men do this too. You get attracted to a very beautiful woman and you have thoughts, and it's very human to think that, but it can lead certainly a man into trouble, I think. If you just base things on looks and not other things, that's volatile and dangerous for a man, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I mean. We have other criteria too. We just not physically attracted to that, but we do have, standards, and men should have standards. And sometimes we don't have standards, and that creates a problem. We're willing to go with the first woman because many of us are starved sexually, that the feminine imperative that he talked about sort of depends upon sexual scarcity, creating sexual scarcity. That is to force men into relationships, and so women collude with one another and slut shame one another, and to make sure that they're not having sex with these men, so that these men are more desperate. That's how I feel that whole scenario on controlling access to sex is part of the feminine imperative.
Munich, September 30th, 1938. Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain abandons the people of Czechoslovakia to the whims of a monstrous dictator named Adolf Hitler. The war that followed shook the earth to its very foundations. Washington, September 30th, 2023. Republicans demand that America abandon the people of Ukraine to the whims of a monstrous dictator named Vladimir Putin. History has taught us the cost of appeasement: destruction, oppression, death. For decades, the Republican Party fought the agents of tyranny.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
That all ended when their party leaders sounded more like a dictator than a president who benefited from Russian interference and returned the favor with support of Russian oppression.
It's great to be with you.
President Joe Biden has stood with the Ukrainian people in their fight against Putin, upholding the ideals that America was founded on, ideals that so many fought and died to defend. The choice in 2024 is no longer between two political parties. It's between freedom and oppression, between war and peace. The stakes have never been higher. The cost has never been greater. The choice has never been more clear. It's us or them.